Not the kind of silence you get in a soundproof room, but the living kind. Dew beating on grass, fog lifting in slow ribbons, the soft scrape of bark as a squirrel shifts its weight. Somewhere ahead, an elk answers dawn with a bugle that slides across the valley like a silver blade. You steady your breath and check the wind with a pinch of ash. Your bow is warm in your palm from the walk-in. Your thoughts quieter than they were by the fire. There's no cheering crowd here, no scoreboard, no trophy wall waiting back home. Just an encounter and a choice. If your idea of hunting is a weekend sport, a photo op, or something that lives only in the realm of regulations and seasons, this scene might feel unfamiliar. But for thousands of years across North America, this was not a pastime. This was sustenance and ceremony braided together. To many Native American communities, a hunt wasn't about conquest. It was about relationship. Animals weren't resources. They were relatives with agency, teachers with lessons, beings with spirit. The measure of a hunter wasn't how many kills they stacked up, but whether they lived up to an ethic. Humility before the animal, responsibility to the community, and balance with the land. That ethic ran deep. Hunters purified themselves before stepping onto a trail. They carried tools made with care and prayer. They asked for guidance, for favor, for forgiveness,
Thank you for this gift.
and they accepted what the day gave them. A clean, swift kill was not just good practice. It was moral obligation. Gratitude wasn't an afterthought. It began long before the arrow loosed and continued long after the meat was shared. Waste was a breach of trust, boasting a red flag, and hoarding a threat to the social fabric and the herd alike. Modern debates about hunting often stop at two frames: sport or management. But long before there were game commissions, there were teachings. About taking only what was needed, about sharing with those who couldn't hunt, about watching the herds and the seasons, and about making the land more fruitful for every creature that touched it. You won't find these teachings in a single book. They lived in songs, winter counts, place names, and the steady example of elders who knew the trails as well as they knew the faces around the fire. This film is not a museum tour. It's a walk back into a worldview that asks hard questions we still haven't finished answering. What if hunting isn't fundamentally about killing? What if it's about consent, of the body and the spirit? What if the deepest measure of success is not the weight of meat on your back, but the weight of gratitude in your chest, and the steadiness of your hand when the moment finally comes? We'll move through 20 lenses: preparation, prayer, tools, land reading, first kills, sharing, predator lessons, ceremonies, mourning, gendered cooperation, stewardship, disruption, and revival. Some details varied widely from nation to nation. There is no single native way. But across geographies and languages, a recognizable ethic shows through like firelight behind a hide wall. Respect, reciprocity, restraint. By the end, how you think about hunting, not just in the woods but in your kitchen, may change. Because whether you hunt or not, we all live by the taking of life. The question is, can we learn to do it with reverence? Let's step onto the trail. Hunting holds two truths at once. You end a life to sustain many. For countless Indigenous communities, sitting with that paradox was the starting point of ethics. If taking life is inevitable, because people must eat, then the only moral path is to take with care, with limits, and with gratitude. This core understanding turned hunters into stewards, not conquerors. Skill mattered: quiet feet, steady aim, patience. But character mattered more. A skilled but boastful hunter was dangerous to the herd and corrosive to the village. The respected hunter was often the quiet one, the sharer, the watcher of weather and calving grounds, the person who knew when to walk away. This paradox shaped custom. Overhunting wasn't only unwise, it was taboo. The consequences were framed spiritually, offending the animal nations, and practically, empty winters. Children heard stories where greed brought famine and humility brought abundance. These weren't just morality tales. They were management systems, encoded in culture. The paradox also reframed success. Bringing home meat was good. Bringing home exactly enough and sharing it wisely was better. Across many nations, portions went first to elders, widows, and families in mourning. Hunters' reputations were measured at the kettle, not the kill site. Finally, the paradox grounded personal responsibility. You couldn't outsource ethics to a rulebook. You embodied them in every choice. Which animal to pursue, which path to take, when to pass, how to end life swiftly, how to use every part, how to speak about it afterward. The paradox never disappeared. You learned to carry it with dignity. While beliefs varied, a broad through line was animacy. Animals, plants, waters, winds, each with spirit. All my relations wasn't a metaphor. It was a daily grammar. In that grammar, the deer wasn't a target. The deer was a relative who might choose to offer itself. Consent showed up in teachings. The animal that steps into your path after a prayer. The bison that turns broadside. The fish that rises to a respectful lure. Hunters were warned. If your heart is proud or your mind is clouded, expect emptiness. Not as punishment, but as a natural withdrawal of trust. This worldview produced practices of reciprocity. Offerings of tobacco, cornmeal, first fat, or a lock of hair acknowledged exchange. Songs returned breath to the world. Words of thanks at the moment of death honored spirit. These weren't decorations on the act. They were the act's moral scaffold. Tools and places were included in the sacred web. A bow might be made with a tree addressed like an elder, a stone point shaped with patience and humility, a favored hunting ground approached with prayer and clean hands. The line between religion and ecology wasn't a line at all. Crucially, this framework guarded against entitlement. If animals are relatives, you don't treat them as inventory. If landscapes are animate, you don't strip them. If consent matters, you learn when to stop chasing and when to stand still. The ethic begins where domination ends. Hunting started long before foot met trail. Preparation was physical, mental, and spiritual. Sweat lodges cleansed body and sharpened mind. Fasting quieted impulses. Smudging with sage, cedar, sweetgrass, or tobacco cleared heavy thoughts and tuned attention. Faces were painted with designs that meant protection, clarity, humility. Intention setting mattered. Hunters named reasons out loud. To feed the elders. To teach a nephew. To honor a promise for a community feast. Stating purpose aligned the personal with the communal and kept ego in check. You weren't hunting for your hunger alone. Group hunts amplified this. Choreographies of roles, scouts, drivers, flankers, butchers, cooks, were reviewed with care. Elders reviewed boundaries, where not to push a herd, which coolies to avoid, how to protect calves. Discipline was a prayer in motion. Youth rites often began here. A first fast, a first sweat, a first blessing over a borrowed bow. Older hunters used these thresholds to lay down teachings. You don't take the lead yet. You watch the wind. You learn when to wait. Your eyes learn before your hands do. Pre-hunt also meant tool care. Retying fletchings, checking hafting, oiling bowstrings, sharpening edges. Maintenance was more than practical. It was reverence for the lives that contributed to your tools. The sinew in the string, the wood in the bow, the stone in the edge. When done right, the trail began with steadiness, not hunger. A steady heart shoots cleaner. A clean shot honors life. Technology and theology were not separate domains. A bow made carelessly could take a life badly. A bow made reverently could take a life cleanly. Hunters learned that ethics lived inside craft. Material choices carried teachings. Cut wood in the right season so it won't split. Thank the tree with tobacco or words. Sinew comes from animals. Treat it like a gift, not a commodity. Stone points teach patience. Hasty napping makes weak edges. Patient pressure yields a durable, surgical line. Decoration wasn't vanity. It was memory and meaning. A red band to honor a relative. An etched chevron reminding the hand to relax. Beadwork recording a successful winter hunt that fed a village through a storm. Tools became archives of responsibility. Care routines were ritualized. Don't step over weapons. Don't toss them on bare ground. Keep them dry, oiled, and wrapped. Repair at the first sign of wear. Lend sparingly and teach the borrower how to return with thanks. Consecration didn't make a weapon magic. It made the user mindful. The best tools in the world can't make an ethical hunter, but they can remind one, this act matters. Ethics without knowledge is just wishful thinking. Hunters apprentice themselves to land. Tracks were texts. Winds were whispers. Bird alarms were roadside signs. A scatter of hairs on bark. A rubbed sapling. A shallow bed in tall grass. Each detail placed animals in time and space. Seasonal calendars. Kept in memory. Winter counts and star lore, balanced taking with timing. Don't pressure does heavy with fawn. Don't burn a favorite feeding ground right before a hard freeze. Do light cool fires so grasses regenerate and forage improves. Do clear encroaching brush where berries and ungulates thrive. Stewardship was proactive. Predator behavior was part of the map. Wolf sign may reveal where herds concentrate. Bears on fish runs teach cycles of abundance. Eagles overhead may mark carcasses. Follow with caution and gratitude. Observing predators taught humility. You are not the only hunter here. Water and wind were silent collaborators. Move crosswind, not upwind. Cross streams where silt doesn't cloud and announce you. Sit where thermals lift your scent away at first light, then shift as the sun warms slopes. This deep literacy made selective, low-impact hunting possible. You didn't need to chase every chance. You needed to choose the right one. If ethics are real, they show at the moment of killing. The principle was simple and strict. End life swiftly and surely. Cruelty is failure. Lingering is failure. Adrenaline-soaked shots you haven't trained for are failures waiting to happen. That's why practice mattered. Arrow groups tight at known distances. Throwing lanes cleared in your mind before you step. Breathing drills to steady a shaking hand. Visualization to prepare for the exact quartering angle you prefer, and to pass when you don't have it. Passing was itself ethical muscle. When a doe appears with a late-season fawn, let her walk. When a bison herd bunches near a cliff in bad footing, don't push. When a bull stands magnificent but wind swirls, resist the fantasy shot. A missed chance is not a moral failure. A poor shot is. When the arrow flies, the work is immediate. Watch impact, listen for the run, mark the line, and wait the necessary minutes to avoid pushing a wounded animal farther. When you track, you do so quietly and competently. If you lose the trail, you get help. Recovering the animal honors the promise you made when you drew. Then gratitude begins. Not after the photo, not after the fillet, but in the stillness while steam rises. Words spoken aloud, a hand on the hide, a small offering. The first cut is careful. The ribs open like a door, and you step through with gentleness. Gratitude was not a hashtag. It was protocol. Immediately after the animal fell, many hunters offered tobacco, cornmeal, water, or the first breath of a song. Some placed cedar boughs or sprinkled sage. Some spoke the animal's name in their language, naming it relative, not trophy. These offerings weren't bribes. They were acknowledgments. You fed us. We will carry you well. Hunters might share the first bite of liver with the youngest child or the oldest grandparent, linking generations through nourishment. The best cuts might go first to those who needed strength. Sometimes the skull or a respectful portion returned to the place of taking with words of thanks. Sometimes bones were placed in trees or on high ground to aid the spirit's journey. Sometimes a small portion was burned, so the aroma rose like prayer. Gratitude also meant care in butchering. Clean cuts, careful hides, nothing trampled underfoot. Jokes were quieted, laughter softened. The energy in the circle grounded. The animal's dignity was protected with the same attention you'd give a sleeping child. When people say, respect the animal, this is what it looks like in action. Food as ceremony, not commodity. Work as devotion, not drudgery. The first successful hunt wasn't a personal victory lap. It was a transfer of obligations. Communities marked it deliberately, so that a young person didn't confuse adrenaline for wisdom. Rituals varied. A first-time deer hunter might not taste their own kill until elders had eaten. A first bison's hide might become a robe gifted to a grandparent. A youth might carry the heaviest quarter, learning what providing actually feels like in shoulders and spine. Mentors used the glow of the moment to carve lessons deeper. Notice how many hands touched this animal after your shot. That's what your arrow means. Work for everyone. Nourishment for everyone. They'd review decisions. Why this animal? Why this angle? Why we stopped here to cut? Why we saved this fat for winter medicines? Pride was honored, but trimmed to fit humility. Here's the truth we circle back to. Whether a hunter on Dawn's Ridge or a kid in a grocery aisle, we live by the gift of other lives. What changes the world is how we receive that gift. If this journey shifted even a corner of the way you think, if the idea of consent between hunter and animal challenged you, if the image of a young person's first hunt becoming a mantle of responsibility inspired you, if the picture of a village sharing meat until everyone's full reminded you of a different measure of success, carry that forward. Carry it into the way you cook, the way you shop, the way you pick up trash on a trail, or sign a petition, or show up for a controlled burn. Carry it into the way you talk to kids about where dinner comes from. Drop a comment. Which teaching sticks with you? Gratitude at the kill? Use it all? Predators as teachers? Or the rule that the first serving goes to those who need it most? What's one practice you'll try this month to move closer to reverence? Learning a plant name, helping a food bank, inviting a neighbor to a shared meal. If this deep dive gave you a new lens, hit like so it travels farther. Subscribe for more long-form explorations of living knowledge, Indigenous building, medieval resilience, Roman water genius, and other places where old wisdom meets new crises. Share this with someone who thinks hunting is only about pulling a trigger. Show them the ceremonies. Show them the stories. Show them the hands that lift together when the quarter comes off the bone. And next time you eat anything, pause. Say thank you. If you have no words, borrow these. All my relations. Then do the next right thing to make those words true.